Hello.
All right. Hello, studio, and hello, internet. Good. We're delighted to be here with Brad Thor, New York Times best-selling author, thriller writer, I think a possible spy, and delighted to talk to him about his forthcoming book, Code of Conduct. So I think, as I said, you might actually be a spy. I'm curious as to how you became an author.
Stephen King had a great line for writers, and it was, write what you love to read, because that's where your passion is. And growing up, I read Freddie Forsyth, John le Carré, all the Clancy novels, and I'd always wanted to write ever since I was a little boy. So that really was the area. I tell people, if you love romance, don't try to find an area where you want to just be the biggest person and make the most money in. You really should read. If it's romances that you love to read, that's where you should write. If it's sci-fi, and for me it was espionage and special operations.
That's fantastic. So one of the things that I was really excited to talk to you about, that I'm aware of, is that you were a member of the Department of Homeland Security's Red Cell Team. So for those not familiar with it, this is a program where you were actually talking to the government about things that could happen. And for most of us, we'll just maybe get drunk and yell at a congressman. You're actually, as an author, giving input to the government.
I still do that.
Yeah.
It's very cathartic to do that. So in the wake of 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security was set up, and within DHS, they put something together, and I think it's the most forward-thinking of any federal program I've ever heard of. It's called the Analytic Red Cell Unit. And their idea was, first of all, they knew that 9/11 had happened because of a failure of imagination on the government's part. And they said, we're just not thinking outside the box well enough. Let's bring in creative thinkers from outside D.C. to help us kind of war game potential scenarios. So they invited me in, Michael Bay, the director of the Transformers movies, and a handful of other people. And I call it the Las Vegas of government programs, because what happens in the Red Cell stays in the Red Cell. I can't take any of that great stuff out and put it in my books. But it was the same way that I plot my thrillers. I did the same thing for the government.
So then you probably can't tell us what keeps you up at night, because you've already given that to the government. Can you tell us the next best thing as to what keeps you up?
You know, the world is not getting safer, unfortunately, and we see, particularly with ISIS. I mean, ISIS is the only group that ever scared Al-Qaeda, and it's a very, very serious organization, and I think we have a lot of preconceived notions about Islamic terrorism, and a lot of them are wrong, particularly when it comes to ISIS, because their core group are very, very bright, advanced degreed people. We're talking about people with master's degrees, PhDs, so to kind of play them off as just, it's over there, we don't need to worry here, kind of a thing is, unfortunately, it's not the world we live in anymore. And with the internet, I mean, ISIS is putting out 100,000 tweets a day. And they're attracting all these young, what they call FAMs, fighting-age males, who are finding them on social media and are really loving the very slick, very high production value propaganda they're putting out. So it's a very, very difficult war for the U.S. to fight.
And you've been dealing with Islamicism for a while. As I recall, there was kind of concern for your person at one point due to some of the fiction that you'd written that was fairly well researched. What kind of things do you think are not known in America and not getting through popular culture about Islamicization?
Well, I tell people that, you're talking of over 1 billion people that are part of the Muslim faith, and that you can't paint everybody in any group with one brush, right? But if you look at Judaism, Christianity have had reformations, Islam has not. And I wrote a thriller called The Last Patriot, which has been called the Da Vinci Code of Islam. And it was based, I call what I do faction, where it's always based on a little bit of fact, and then I throw in a lot of fiction. And one of the things I talked about in The Last Patriot, my thriller, was that George Bush wasn't the first U.S. president to go to war against Islamic terror. It was actually Thomas Jefferson, in the form of going up against the Barbary Coast pirates that were kidnapping all of these American sailors and trying to ransom them back. And they realized we couldn't keep paying these ransoms. We'd have to go in and fight them. It's a really fascinating piece of American history that I wove into a contemporary thriller. But that book got banned in Saudi Arabia, and it also put me on the bad guys' radar, and that's what kicked off all of the death threats and all that kind of stuff that I get, because I fictionalized a missing chapter from the Quran. So you can go out and you can make fun of Buddhists, you can make fun of Catholics, Mormons, Mennonites. I joke about Amish drive-by shootings, clippity-clop, 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 bang. You can do all that kind of stuff, but the fundamentalists, not the moderate Muslims, but the fundamentalists have declared this part of the public square, you cannot come in, you can't even fictionalize fundamentalist Islam in there. And I did, because I've always said that I have a right to write whatever I want to write. And it's equaled by another right just as powerful, which is the right not to read what I write. So, but they don't see it that way.
And you've decided you're going to keep doing that rather than just always doing Cold War, which is what I would do. I would just go, okay, I'll just write Cold War stuff. But
you know what? I mix it up. So I have done Muslim terrorists in the books, but I've also done different kinds of bad organizations, whether it be in D.C. I did something kind of a really cool suspense thriller that revolved around something very bad happening at the Federal Reserve. Now, that doesn't sound super sexy, and I normally I'm like, oh, it's a really good thriller about all these people dying. I don't mention the Fed, but there was a large contingent of people that picked up the book not knowing that that was in there. Probably the nicest piece of fan mail I get is from readers that say, I love to read your books with my laptop open because I can't tell what's real and what's not real, and I find things in your novels and I'm convinced you made it up, only to figure out it's true. So I try to do a wide range of stuff. I don't want to be just known as the guy that does Muslim terrorists. I think that would get old, particularly for me as a writer too. So you'll find that I've got all different kinds of threats, but all the threats I write about in the book are real threats that oftentimes people don't even know the country's facing. But I'm asking the question you asked me, so my CIA buddies, my Navy SEAL buddies, what keeps you up at night? And that's what I end up using in the books.
And despite this, you seem very optimistic and very happy. Is this just a part of your personality, or is this because you've said that it's getting less safe, but you're at least able to go forward and keep working with it?
Well, I think we've got an amazing country. Our DNA is like none other in the world. And so I've always been very optimistic that no matter what threats get thrown at the United States, you look how people pulled together after 9/11. It didn't matter, what was in the bank account of your neighbor, where they went to church or didn't go to church or mosque or synagogue or any of that kind of stuff. Didn't matter how they voted. We were all Americans together. And I think no other country on the face of the earth has as much promise and has as much to be as optimistic about as the United States. I really believe we've got nothing but good times in front of us if we want to do the work to get there. I mean, it's not free. It's not going to be given to us by any outside source, but there's no greater country in the world and no greater time to be living in that country than right now, I think.
Wonderful. I'm going to confess, I've not read Code of Conduct yet. I did try and hack your computer to get an advanced copy. I was unable to do it.
Doesn't come out till tomorrow.
Doesn't come out till tomorrow. It comes out tomorrow. I am going to steal this complimentary copy that they've left for me because I read a sample chapter and was thrilled by it. It seems like a really fascinating and fun book. Where did you get the idea for it? Like, what launched this?
Well, and I think Andrew read the opening chapter of the book, and that's what my books are known for, that the action starts on page 1 and it doesn't let up until the very end of the book. So, as I said, faction, and I like to find real things in the real world to write about. There were 2 big things that I used for the bedrock of my new summer thriller, Code of Conduct, and that was, 1, somebody spent a fortune down in Georgia erecting these huge slabs of granite that are being called the American Stonehenge. I know, I guess somebody's going to go like this up in front. I hadn't heard about it either. And then I looked it up online and saw that there's this terrifying message written in multiple languages on every one of these huge granite slabs. Who does this? Who puts something like that up in the middle of a farmer's field in Georgia? And I thought, okay, it's kind of interesting. Then I read an article about a very secret meeting of one of the world's most powerful organizations. They rented a chalet up in the Austrian Alps a couple of years ago, and one of the position papers, one of the white papers, was leaked from this top secret meeting. And there were all these things in this international body's secret meeting notes that mirrors what's on those slabs of granite down in Georgia. And that's real. And I said, wow, sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. And that's what I'm going to base Code of Conduct on. So that's the jumping off point for my new thriller.
That's amazing. And I want to read it even more than I already did, having read the first chapter. Have you been down to see the Stonehenge in Georgia?
I have not. I have a couple of friends that have, and so I got to see video and photographs, and it's really wild because it's lined up to take advantage of celestial events. It's like Stonehenge, but the message that's written on this thing is terrifying and should terrify everyone, with whomever this person or group is that put it up, what they want to achieve. It's scary, scary stuff.
And at the very least, you should do a book signing there. When you go through Georgia, I think that would be a really awesome event to do.
I got to figure out where a sniper can't get me. Where I'm not going to get shot for exposing it.
So in Scott Horvath novels, How different are you from Scott Horvath? Is he just you in the novel?
So this is my protagonist, who is a Navy SEAL that gets recruited to the White House to help them bolster their counterterrorism efforts, the Secret Service. And the president ends up realizing the dumbest thing we could do is put this guy on defense. He is an apex predator, and he's much better if we set him loose and put him on offense. So I like to joke that Scott Horvath is my alter ego, just the way I'm sure James Bond was for Ian Fleming and Jack Ryan was for Tom Clancy. And I say, Scott Horvath gets to do everything my wife won't let me do. And whenever I say that, she always reminds me that she let me go to Afghanistan a few years ago in the thick of the war, and which was amazing for me. I said, I have this opportunity to go. Is it okay with you? And she says, well, you could get hit by a bus tomorrow, and I love you if it's what you really want to do. I'll worry about you, but my job is not to say no. My job is to help you realize those things you want to do in life. So she'd said, make sure all the insurance papers are signed, and then go have fun.
Wait, you went to Afghanistan during the war
as
research for a book?
I did, to research my thriller, The Apostle.
That kudos to you for doing that. I would go to Starbucks and read about Afghanistan. That is the level that I would be willing to get to. If you could go anywhere for your next book, where would you want to go to research?
That's fascinating. So before I became an author, I had a television series on public television nationwide. It was called Traveling Light. And I was the host, the producer, the writer. In fact, I was so self-conscious about how, even though it was a nationwide show, it was a travel show. Get a backpack, get a rail pass, go to Europe. Here are the cool hostels, here are the neat museums, here are the great nightclubs. But I was so insecure about how small my production company was that I would, in the credit crawl, I would make up names. I put friends from high school, characters from The Simpsons, just so we could look like a bigger thing than we were. And so I spent a lot of time in Europe with that show. So my books have been in Europe, the United States, and I've started to branch out because I realized there were parts of the world that I didn't know about and I wanted to know more about. And without giving it away for code of conduct, very quickly you get into a part of the world that I was really excited to write about. I try to get everywhere that I write about in my novels, and if I can't, then I want to talk to somebody who has operated there. I want to talk to either somebody in the intelligence game or in the special operations game, because they walk into one of these situations knowing danger could be around every corner, and they take it all in. They'll tell you what it smells like, what it sounds like, what it looks like. So as far as where I'd like to go, I've been looking a lot at South America. I've had a lot of friends that have gone down there. I had a friend of mine that ran all of Glock Pistols operations in South America. He's an young Austrian gentleman that I had gone to grade school with, and he raved about South America, different places that he loved, different cities, Buenos Aires, and so that's a place that I'm hoping to get to this winter to do research for the next book.
Well, as a fan, I'm going to encourage you to go to South America and hang out in Buenos Aires as opposed to go to Afghanistan or wherever else is going to horrify your wife. We want you to keep writing these novels. What is your creative process like in writing these? Because they're very well researched, they're very creative, there's lots of thrill going on. Do you get up and read things and then come up with a way to facilitate it into a plot? Are you walking through a field and it just strikes you? Like where do these ideas come from, and how much balance do you have with research?
If you talk to anyone who's a writer, they'll tell you the writing part is not the hard part. It's the sitting down to write. That's the hard part. You will have the cleanest refrigerator, the most organized office. It is amazing. I stole, and this is with all, not to make fun of the United Negro College Fund slogan, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. I shortened that years ago to a mind is a terrible thing, period. Because I all think we have that voice in the back of our heads that's constantly nibbling at us saying, you can't do this, it's not going to work. That's why I had put off becoming a writer for so long. I'd always wanted to do it, and yet I went into TV, which was considerably harder, public television, having to fundraise to get money for the shows, because I was afraid, what if I take time to write a novel, nobody likes it, I don't get a book deal? Well, I don't have that now. After finishing my first novel, I had that feeling, this has got to be what it's like to climb a mountain for the first time, run your first marathon. I knew I could do it again. And that was a great feeling of accomplishment. I'd never be on my deathbed saying, if only I had tried that. So my process now, though, it's still work. Jack London was famous for saying, you can't wait for inspiration, you have to go after it with a club. And it really is true. It is all about seat of pants to seat of chair. So I'll get up in the morning, whatever my workout is for that day, I'll do it after the kids are on their way to school. And then I get into the office, and my goal is 5 single-space pages, 2,500 words a day. Now, it's not like Hemingway. I wish I was done at noon and could go drink and go fishing for the rest of the day. It oftentimes, I'll hit the desk at about 8:30, and I'm not out till 6 o'clock. So it really is all about discipline, discipline, discipline. But the ideas come two places, either in the shower or after that second glass of wine. It seems when I'm, at my most relaxed that they make it in.
I'm going to suggest you combine them.
Drink wine
just drink
in the shower?
wine in the shower. I do that. I've yet to write a novel of your caliber, but perhaps in the future. One of the things that I'm fascinated by with a lot of my novelist friends is I'll talk to them and I'll go, "How's the novel going?" And they go, "This character really surprised me." And I'm always kind of alarmed, or not alarmed, but surprised by that because they're writing it.
Right.
But do you ever have a moment where it turns on you and you weren't anticipating how it was going to go?
It's funny because I don't believe in Deus Ex Machina, where suddenly there's a character you haven't heard of that comes in and saves the day. I think that's cheating, and it's not fair. I've always said I'll drive a taxi cab before I will phone it in. I mean, I'll find something else to do. I will never expect anybody to buy a Brad Thor thriller that isn't the absolute best I'm capable of. With each book, I try to get better. I'm reading books about writing. In between writing books, I'm always trying to push myself. But I paint my characters into corners all the time, and I will end my day, I'll hit that 2,500 word mark, and I will walk upstairs, and my wife can tell if it's a bourbon night or a wine night just by the look on my face. And she always tells me, listen, don't worry, this is what makes your thrillers so engaging, is that even you don't know what's going to happen next. So that is the challenge, but I try to make it hard, and I do have that happen where I don't know how I'm going to get out of this, and I have stress. I'll go upstairs and say, I don't know how I'm going to do. My wife, you'll figure it out tomorrow, and sure enough, I do. And I think by challenging myself so much, that's what makes the book such page turners.
I love that we've now been talking to you about 15 minutes, and the only intimation of stress was fixing these situations. You're like, well, I'm going to go talk to a Pashtun tribal leader for a couple of weeks and live in a yurt with Al-Qaeda. And then, but if I have to, how is he going to get that screwdriver? I think that's amazing. Have you seen a shift in thrillers from Cold War through post 9/11? Do you think there's been any type of major cultural change that's happened in the last 15 years that separates it from other thrillers that we might have grown up with?
Yeah, I think there's one key difference. So in the Cold War, obviously, we had all these great thrillers, and the Russians were the bad guys. And again, it's those great people like Freddie Forsyth and John le Carré, who I read growing up. And what I think was really scary in those scenarios is that the Russian could be living next door to you and you'd have no idea. He could be posing as you. And that was they did that a lot in those novels. At the very end, you realize the guy was either a double agent or whatever. They were also committed to a landlocked area. So it was part ideology, but also part state, right? They were state-sponsored, as opposed to now, the biggest challenges and dangers we face are from stateless actors. So I think that does change it a little bit, but I also think that you can overdo it with having Muslim terrorists, and there's only so many ways I think you can come up with to blow up a city or whatever it's going to be. So that's why I've tried to branch out and do other things that I see as equally dangerous, other threats facing the country, and to make those books interesting and maybe a relief for people who said, you know what, I don't want to read another thriller that's got another terrorist bad guy in it. I want something else, something different.
And if I'm not mistaken, in addition to being a creative, strategic source for the United States government, I think you're also associated with the Heritage Foundation, or were. So this is a think tank that oftentimes deals with defense. Are there any particular go-to sources that you like reading for strategy and that kind of? Are you just sitting down and reading tomes of Kissinger every night? Are you going through when you're in the yurt in Afghanistan? What are you reading?
What am I reading in the yurt in Afghanistan? Well, I try to seek out people who are experts in their area. If I pick something for a book, normally what I want to do is pick something I don't know anything about and that I'm excited about and want to know more about, because I figure by the time I'm done researching it, if I can break it down so that it's exciting in a book, then I've probably got a good grasp of it. So whether it's with those guys or more often than not, I'm talking to men and women who are active in either the FBI, the CIA, special operations community, and I'm asking them, hey, this idea I have for a book. Does this make sense to you? How might you go about handling it? And then, like that fan mail that I enjoy getting about, I have to read your laptops, or I have to read your novels with my laptop open because I learned so much. I also love hearing from men and women in the intelligence, military, and law enforcement fields who say, that's exactly what we're facing. That's exactly how we handle it. So it's not, but it has to be entertaining, right? I mean, I loved Clancy, but I didn't need 10 pages on how how a missile works. All I need to know is that you've got a special operations team, they're lasing a target, and the missile comes in, and boom, there go the bad guys. So Elmore Leonard once said, when asked by a young writer for the best piece of advice he could give, Elmore Leonard said, never start with the weather, dark and stormy night, and always leave out the parts that people skip. So it's a really good piece of advice, is if you want people to turn those pages, make sure that it's fast and it's easy to digest, because you don't want people to bog down in too much of the minutia. It's not an instruction manual.
Okay, don't talk about weather, skip the parts people skip, drink in the shower and go to Afghanistan. I've got it.
There you go. That's it. It's a secret to success right there, Andrew.
I'm going to write a book. Well, I have enjoyed talking to you so far, but I want to open this up to the audience and let your many readers that are assembled here get their questions in. So why don't we go ahead and kick off the Q&A?
And the first one's always the hardest. Nobody wants to be the first one to raise their hand. Oh, there we go.
Thank you. So you've produced the show Traveling Light, among others. With being the producer of that show, has that career informed you in any way as being a best-selling author?
That's a great question, and I've never been asked. That's a terrific, yes, absolutely. When I write, it's very cinematic for me. I am actually seeing the story play out on the movie screen of my mind, wondering, what would this look like in a theater? And it's funny, because normally one of the first questions I get asked is about Hollywood and the movies and what's going on with Hollywood. And one of my novels, called The Athena Project, has been optioned by Warner Brothers, and it's about an all-female Delta Force team. And that is being made with Ronda Rousey, the mixed martial arts bantamweight champion. Ronda's a triple threat, Ronda Rousey. She is an incredible athlete, incredible actor, and probably one of the most brilliant people and nicest people I've ever met. Very cool. If you're looking for an awesome, inspirational story, I highly recommend Ronda's new book that's out too, Your Fight, My Fight. Right. You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, I think we've already got one down there.
Yes.
Hi. How much of your fiction is based on your experience in the Department of Homeland Security?
That's a good question. So they brought me in to think in the same way I think for writing the novels, and I refer to it as the Las Vegas of government programs. What happens at the Red Cell stays in the Red Cell. So it has been neat to meet people who have gone overseas to do some of the nation's most dangerous business, because that's part of it. They team you with people who have been there and done that. But any of the ideas that I've developed for the government, so there was a particular method of attack that I thought would be extremely successful here. And I brought it up in the Red Cell, and then this method of attack got used somewhere in the world. I'm not allowed to say where. And I called up one of the facilitators at the Red Cell program, and I said, hey, it's all over the news. And they told me, they said, yeah, you still can't, we get it. Yeah, that was your idea, and we know you came up with that, but you can't go out and tell people and pat yourself on the back and say, I predicted that, and that happened. So I can't. But for instance, in my thriller, The First Commandment, the very first page has 5 high-value Guantanamo Bay detainees being swapped out, being traded out. And I wrote that book several years ago. That's the exact number of people we traded for Bo Bergdahl. I've done things like I wrote about Abu Nidal surfacing dead, and shortly after Abu Nidal surfaced in Iraq, they said he committed suicide by shooting himself in the head repeatedly. Kind of hard to shoot yourself in the head more than one time, but that's what the Iraqis claimed. And then my second novel, Path of the Assassin, was all about hijacking American airliners. And I was writing it right when 9/11 happened. In fact, I had been in contact with one of the major domestic carriers, their head of security, trying to, and this guy was like, listen, I'm not going to tell you how to hijack one of our airplanes. And I knew a pilot that was very well regarded at this airline, so it was funny, because my wife said, every time the doorbell rang, she figured it was the FBI coming to say, why were you asking all these questions about hijacking right before 9/11? So there is this kind of reading the tea leaves, and I try to see over the horizon with my fiction, so that you're reading it going, oh my gosh, this could happen tomorrow. Yes, sir.
This question is from Periscope, and they just want to know, who are some of your favorite authors? Who are the people that you look up to, that you read and you enjoy very much?
It's a great, great question. I've got 2 dear friends of mine who I owe a tremendous amount of poker money to, so I always make sure that I give a shout out to Steve Barry and James Rollins every time I do one of these. Steve and Jim and I, kind of started our careers at the same time and came up together. They're both great thriller authors. I love their work. J.L. Bourne is another author. He's actually a captain in the Navy. Writes probably I love zombie fiction, and he writes some of the best stuff I have ever read. I mean, 28 Days Later is nothing compared to J.L. Bourne's stuff, so I really like his stuff. And I've always liked, probably one of my favorite nonfiction books, because it's so terrifying, and I've read it again and again and again, is In the Garden of Beasts by Eric Larson, that talks all about the Nazis' rise to power in Germany in the 1930s, and how so many Americans kind of look the other way. It's a terrifying book, and I see things in that novel, and I see how we all say, how could that happen? How could we allow that to happen? Blah, 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 blah. Where we knew the rail lines, and we knew people were being shipped to concentration camps, so we could have bombed the rail lines and we didn't do anything. Well, guess what? They have stuff that's even worse in North Korea, and we have satellite photos now, and we don't do anything about it. But In the Garden of Beasts, one of my favorite nonfiction books. So Rollins, and Barry, J.L. Bourne, and then Eric Larson. I'm just starting his book about the Lusitania now, which is everybody's raving about. So,
we have time for one more question.
So you've had a new book, I think, every year since 2002.
Correct. Yep.
So
correct.
How does an author stay inspired, and do you have any plans to slow down?
It's a great question. Well, if I slow down, then my family doesn't eat. So that's one great inspiration, is I've got to put food on the table. You know what? I believe that which we're most afraid of in life is that which we are most destined to do. I was terrified of failing as a writer, but I am so glad I went after it. I love my job, and it's hard. And I wouldn't love it as much as I do if it was easy. So for me, it's that challenge of trying to top myself. And I mean, I'm serious. I set the bar higher and higher with each book, because I work for all of you. I work for the readers. I don't work for the publisher. The people who are my bosses are the people who buy my books. And so I look at what they say on Amazon. I interact with them, Facebook, Twitter, wherever it is on the internet that I can find them, AOL, wherever they are and they want to talk to me. I want to hear from them because they're my employers. So I'm passionate about what I do. I love it, I love it, I love it. And I constantly challenge myself to get better. And I think that really is the greatest gift I've given to myself, is getting over that fear and being able to go out and grab a career that's so fulfilling and which I love.
Well, we're thrilled that you did. We keep you continue to write novels and continue going to dangerous locations, but then successfully leaving them to bring us news of them. I have enjoyed talking to you tremendously. I am looking forward to stealing and reading this book, and everybody at home should buy it and read it as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you.